Canto 3, Chapter 21, conversation between Manu and Kardama. And we start with text 1.
And go to 2 as well.
And 2.
If you like.
Okay, well, let's see. They're kind of different. So we'll start with verse 1. Vidura uvacha
Vidura uvacha
Swayambhuvasya
Swayambhuvasya
cha mano vangsha parama samata katyatam bhagavan yatra maitune naidire praja Vidura uvacha Swayambhuvasya cha mano Vansha parama samata Katyatam bhagavan yatra Maitune naidire praja Vidura uvacha Swayambhuvasya cha mano Vangsha parama samata Katyatam bhagavan yatra Maitune naidire praja Vidura uvacha Swayambhuvasya cha mano Vangsha parama samata Katyatam bhagavan yatra Maitune naidire praja
Vidura uvacha Swayambhuvasya cha mano Vamsa parama samata Katyatam bhagavan yatra Maitune dire praja Vidura uvacha Swayambhuvasya cha mano Vamsa parama samata Katyatam bhagavan yatra Maitune naidire praja
Mataji's.
Vidura uvacha Swayambhuvasya cha mano Vamsa parama samata
Katyatam bhagavan yatra Maitune naidire praja Vidura uvacha Vidura said Swayambhuvasya of Swayambhuva cha and mano of Manu Vangsha the dynasty Parama most Samata esteemed Katyatam kindly describe Bhagavan O worshipful sage Yatra in which Maitunena through sexual sexual intercourse.
through sexual intercourse.
Edire,
Edire,
multiplied.
multiply.
Praja,
Praja,
the progeny.
the progeny.
Translation. Vidura said, the line of Swayambhuva Manu was most esteemed. O worshipful sage, I beg you, give me an account of this race, whose progeny multiplied through sexual intercourse. Oh, Hare Krishna. Should have given it to Prabhupada, but anyway. Hare Krishna. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Regulated sex life to generate good population is worth accepting. Actually, Vidura was not interested in hearing the history of persons who merely engaged in sex life, but he was interested in the progeny of Swayambhuva Manu, because in that dynasty, good devotee kings appeared who protected their subjects very carefully with spiritual knowledge. By hearing the history of their activities, therefore, one becomes more enlightened. An important word used in this connection is parama samata, which indicates that the progeny created by Swayambhuva Manu and his sons was approved of by great authorities. In other words, sex life for creating exemplary population is acceptable to all sages and authorities of Vedic scripture. The verse again. Vidura uvacha swayambhuvasya chamano vangsha paramasammata katyatam bhagavan yatra maitune nadire praja. Vidura said, the line of Swayambhuva Manu was most esteemed. O worshipful sage, I beg you, give me an account of this race, whose progeny multiplied through sexual intercourse. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyas Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Well, as Srila Prabhupada points out in the beginning of the purport, Vidura, who's speaking here, Vidura, who's great saintly, very saintly person, Vidura was not interested in hearing the history of persons who merely engaged in sex life. That's first point, that Prabhupada, there's a description Srila Prabhupada once, when he was taking a group of devotees on a tour around different parts of India and generally staying in the homes of wealthy business people who are pious Hindu people. In one such house with one such family, the father, the husband, who was a somewhat elderly, at least a somewhat older person, brought all his sons and daughters and their and their wives and husbands and children to meet Srila Prabhupada. And the description goes that he sort of lined them up, and then one by one they came forward, and the gentleman said, and this is my oldest son, such and such, and this is his wife, such and such. and this is their son, and this is their daughter, and this is my second son, such and such, and this is his wife, and this is their son and their daughter, and this is my third son, and you get the idea. So there was a number of them in a queue, and at some point during all of this, Prabhupada turned to one of the disciples right by him and said, "And this is my sex life." Hare Krishna. Excuse us, but such is the subject matter here. As Prabhupada says, and as we just read again, Vidura was not interested, and we're not interested. Certainly we should not be interested. Habits may be there from the past and conditioned tendencies to become attracted and so on like that. But really, when one takes up Krishna consciousness, if one is trying at least to take up Krishna consciousness in some really a more serious and meaningful way, then at the very least, one should understand and accept within the heart that this whole program of materialistic family life and sexual activity, and then just everything that evolves from that, the housing and just all the necessities of such a lifestyle, that they are, at least on the material level, certainly, they're very much not just not required for Krishna consciousness, but actually they're very much opposed to the development of Krishna consciousness. And the fact is, and again, we should be aware of this, and we should be able to see this around us as life is going on in the world around us, that people, the vast majority, if not all, plus in other species, that they are entangled, deeply entangled in this material world, directly and or indirectly, on this basis. And that is life in the material world. And like we said, it's not simply in the human life. It's there in the animals, and it's there in different ways by the arrangement of material nature, by the arrangement of Krishna, in all the millions of species of life. What a thing! What a thing! It is the great trap which has already kept us here within the material world for however long we've been here, which is long. And it continues to be the trap which is keeping and is continuing to keep and will continue to keep, unfortunately, so many conditioned souls trapped within this material world, and in that way, on one hand, unable to realize and actually enter into their truly natural way of life as spiritual persons, eternal servants of Krishna. It'll stop them from being able to gain that ultimate benefit. And on the other hand, it will keep them in a whole cycle of suffering. A whole cycle of suffering. It's just amazing, actually, the suffering the conditioned souls go through. And we see it. We see it. I imagine many of you are aware that there's a whole situation internationally right now about a particular previously, as I understand, previously unknown disease, the coronavirus, which is killing people more and more. But then I read a week or something ago, when it was all just sort of starting to develop, or it had developed, but it was not at some very drastic level. Someone made a comment in some sort of news thing that it's all very well that this disease has killed at that particular point in time maybe 100 people, and people are becoming more and more concerned, and some are very concerned. But he said during the same period, more than 8,000 people have died of the flu. That disease had reached 100. So this person, don't ask me where the person got the figures from, but anyway, he said, from the flu, who has never had the flu in their lives, 10 times probably, but the ordinary flu had killed 8,000 people during the same period of time. So what can you say? Well, you can say a lot, actually. So part of being or becoming a devotee and progressing in Krishna consciousness is to become more clear on these points. There are two sides. In a certain sense, there are two sides to the process of the development of Krishna consciousness, particularly on our levels. One side, of course, is appreciating Krishna and what it means to have a relationship with Krishna and the appreciate the way of life of Krishna consciousness and the goal. But the other one is to appreciate, in the sense of understanding, what is wrong with material life. Prabhupada does say, at least in one place, these are like two rails on which a train may run. At least traditionally trains ran on two rails. And if something happened to one of the rails, well, it would just be a disaster all round. So similarly, at least in that context, using that example, that trying to develop Krishna consciousness, certainly without sufficient attraction, attachment, appreciation, understanding of Krishna, and how nice is Krishna and how nice is Krishna consciousness. If one is simply just strong on the negative side, this material world is a place of misery, then there'll be like a fatal imbalance. And even on the other side, as we see with the people they're called the Sahajiyas, who have some consciousness of Krishna in one way or another, usually another, not really, not so valid, but they have some consciousness of Krishna, actually. Unfortunately, it's distorted for different reasons, but one reason for the distortion is they have not understood much, if at all, what's wrong with material life and materialistic types of attachments. So even in some cases, they try to apply, particularly as described here, the male, female, and that sort of classic type of situation in material life. Having failed to understand that, how it is undesirable for the development of real Krishna consciousness, and thinking they can actually apply it in the sense of a type of simply enjoyment in a Krishna conscious context, well, again, it's just another type of disaster. Material world, Maya, is sort of the queen of disaster. Yeah. She orchestrates disaster just endlessly and fantastically. So therefore, for someone who really wants to become Krishna conscious and has at least some real aspiration, I'd like to go back to Godhead at the end of this life and at least develop as much as I can, as much as possible in that way, to become, as Prabhupada says, merely engaged in sex life is just too undesirable. And so, as Prabhupada says, Vidura, and of course we're not on the level of Vidura, but people following in his footsteps should not be interested in this whole situation and what goes with it. But on the other hand, as Prabhupada begins the purport, regulated sex life to generate good population is worth accepting. So it's not just as the Mayavadis, the impersonalists, say, that anything to do with that, in any way pious or impious, anything to do with the idea of sex life is just totally rejected. But in this Krishna conscious context, there is a place for it. And that place, even Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, kamosmi, kamosmi. Kama, K-A-M-A, generally being translated as lust, is the general translation of that word. But kama, asmi. Asmi means I am. In other words, I am that sex life which is born of religious principles, which is there in a very Krishna conscious context. And therefore Prabhupada goes on to say that Vidura, although he's not interested, and we should definitely not be interested in just hearing about people who were just merely engaged in sex life and all the different things which then evolve from sex life. Vidura was not interested, and we should not be, but Vidura was interested in the progeny, the children of Swayambhuva Manu, because amongst at least his offspring were great, good devotee kings, great devotee kings actually, great devotees who were kings, who as kings, of course, as heads of state, gave protection to their citizens, meaning physical protection, law and order, and in a sort of international sense, protection from any enemies from other parts of the world, invasion and all that. So they gave that sort of protection, which is part of the essential dharma of a king or of a ruler, whatever, if it's a king, president, prime minister, whatever you care to say, a dictator. After all, a king generally is effectively a dictator anyway. But anyway, whatever sort of brand of leadership is there in the state, that they have that essential and sacred duty to give physical protection. In fact, the term Kshatriya, I wouldn't say that Cyril Ramaphosa is really a Kshatriya. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Not just for reasons of political correctness or not, but maybe he is. I don't know. I don't think Jacob was. Or Donald. All these characters. But anyway, Kshatriya, the actual term means shat. Shat means pain, hurt. Shat. And triya is a form of the verb trayate. Trayate mahato bayat, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. That just a little advancement in Krishna consciousness can trayate, can protect you from mahato bayat, from the greatest fear, which is to fall down into lower species of life from human. So anyway, trayate means to protect. So Kshatriya means one who protects from pain. Physical pain, but other types of pain too. So the progeny of Swayambhuva Manu, they were good devotee kings, and they gave that sort of the physical type of protection. But as Prabhupada says, they protected their subjects very carefully with spiritual knowledge. Very carefully. In other words, they were themselves deeply engaged, deeply involved and practicing and committed to the life of Krishna consciousness. They didn't just tell the Brahmins, just go for it and tell the people about these things. They were themselves Raja Rishis, saintly kings, meaning very, very Krishna conscious kings. Even, of course, we have the example of Maharaj Parikshit and the whole interaction with Shukadev Goswami. Srila Prabhupada makes the point in one of the purports there in the earlier part of the whole discussion that actually the two of them, Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev, they were more or less equally qualified in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada makes the point that it was only due to the circumstances, means Maharaj Parikshit was cursed, and therefore it was appropriate for him to be instructed and really sort of his existing Krishna consciousness fortified by good association and good instruction at that point. But otherwise, Prabhupada makes the point that if the circumstances had been different, Maharaj Parikshit could have instructed Shukadev Goswami. He was qualified if the circumstances had been different. Yes. So these good devotee kings, as Prabhupada says, they were real practicing devotees. Real practicing devotees. And very highly intelligent with great insight into how to practice and spread and maintain Krishna consciousness individually and collectively throughout the whole kingdom. So therefore, as Prabhupada points out, if we hear about such people, and their progeny also, the different generations, then we become more enlightened. We become more enlightened. And it's not like hearing about, as we were saying earlier, it's not like hearing about or thinking about or, in whatever way, having watching like some media or film or something about people who are just simply, as Prabhupada says, merely engaged in sex life, just like that. It's just the opposite of enlightening. But here, to hear about these people is enlightening. The different generations that came. And therefore, amongst the subject matters of a Purana, there are Puranic literatures. There are the 18 Puranas, and then there are sort of sub-Puranas, Upa-Puranas, and then there are other literatures of Vedic, either Vedic or kind of Vedic nature, which exhibit the characteristics of a Purana. One of which, of course, is liberation. Another is describing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But one of them is Raj Anuvangsa. Raja meaning the kings, and Vangsa meaning the families, the descendants, the lines that came from the kings. In order for a literature to be accepted as Puranic, it has to have descriptions of the generations of the devotee kings, not the generations of the descendants of Queen Elizabeth and what's his name, Prince Philip, and Harry. Anyway, we'll carefully avoid talking about that. What a joke, a sad joke. And a very funny part, I actually listened to for about less than a minute, maybe 30 seconds, Harry trying to explain, his rationale for kind of moving away from the royal family. And one thing I realized? Hare Krishna. He doesn't even speak very good English. What to speak of the Queen's English, I say. But it's sort of like very common, a commoner's English. So Raj Anuvangsa, in order for a literature to be accepted as Puranic and not simply historical, or political, you could say. Political in the sense of how things were being ruled. In order for a literature to be accepted as Puranic, it has to describe generations of the great kings. In this case, we're talking about Swayambhuva Manu, who's just like practically first generation in the universe. Otherwise, it's rejected. Or if not rejected, but it's not accepted as being Puranic as such. It might be, what's the term? Anu, Mahabharat, Ramayana. They are, Itihas. Yeah, maybe Itihas, but not Purana. Purana has a somewhat higher position generally than just Itihas, purely historical literature. So, and all of this, all the progeny and what they do and how they develop and the names of their wives, or, many of them had more than one. As Prabhupada says here, Paramasamata, it's all approved by great authorities. Yeah, it's not just there for interest's sake. It's approved by great authorities. In other words, sex life for creating exemplary population is acceptable to all sages and authorities of Vedic scripture. Yeah. So that is what is being discussed here. Right at the beginning, first verse in chapter 21 of the 3rd canto. And then anyway, we'll see how it all evolves from there. But basically it's going to introduce us to Devahuti and Kardama in due course, and that whole narration, very important narration, leading up to the appearance of Lord Kapila. Hare Krishna. Any comment or question? Swarup Damodar Prabhu. Jai Sachinandan Prabhu.
Well, you made a point earlier about King Parikshit, and I think in terms of etiquette, Maharaj Parikshit is a Kshatriya.
Yeah?
So, because even in the Bhagavad Gita, Duryodhana, when he introduces his he says, persons like you, Drona is the Brahmana, Bhishma, Kshatriya.
Yes, true. Of course, there are different considerations there. One is etiquette. But Prabhupada does make that point, and it was the situation. And, I must say, I just did a seminar on Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And, of course, there's so many interesting things there. It's just an ocean of interesting things. But one very interesting thing, right in the very later part at least, what I think chapter 5 of the Gopakumar, the second part. Gopakumar's in Dwarika, and he's staying by Krishna's direction. He's staying with Uddhava. And one day Narada Muni arrives. And so there's now a discussion, Narada Muni, Uddhava, and they're speaking to Gopakumar. And they say how you, Gopakumar, you are from that place, the higher place, which we don't have so much access to. Yeah. You don't have so much access to, but at this stage, you don't exactly know so much about. So you need some help in order to make the step into where you really must go, Goloka Vrindavan. So Narada Muni says to Uddhava, Narada Muni of course is a Brahmin, Uddhava is a Kshatriya. And Narada says to Uddhava that you were there, you have been there, you have experienced it. You please explain to Gopakumar. And Uddhava says, no. I'm a Kshatriya. You're a Brahmin. How can I explain in your presence? And Narada says, oh, come on. Are you still maintaining these types of ideas? Yeah. You were there. You explain. Yeah. Although Narada, no, who now? Narada then makes the point, well, Who makes the point? Uddhava. Uddhava makes the point that, okay, you may say like that, in a certain sense, I should be the one who speaks even though I'm Kshatriya and you're Brahmin. Maybe, but even our Lord, he accepts the role of a Kshatriya. So, in other words, it may not be so simple. Yeah, although generally it would be like that. But Prabhupada makes the point that in principle at least, if the circumstance, if the tables had somehow been drastically turned, Parikshit had the spiritual qualification to instruct Shukadev. And, for that matter, when Shukadev walked in there, it's the last chapter, pretty much, of the first canto. When he walked in, of course, he's Brahmin, he's the son of Vyas, but he's junior. He's only he's probably under 20. He may be 16 or 17. He's just a teenager, just a boy. And there you've got all the big people. Lord Shiva is there. And and Vyas and Narada and so many others. But they all let Shukadev speak to Parikshit because they could just recognize, talk about high level of spiritual awareness. Just by looking at him, Shukadev, they could see, yes, he has the qualification, more than we have. And Narada and Vyas sat and listened. They didn't get up. Pretty much everyone else got up to receive Shukadev as a senior, but they didn't get up. But still they sat and listened. And at the end, both of them said that when they heard Shukadev speak, like particularly Vyasadeva, what he had instructed Shukadev, he said it was so wonderful, it was like he'd never heard it before. And it was just so rich. It was just a better experience than he had had in giving it to Shukadev, more or less. Anyway, but your point is well taken. It's an important point. Yes.
I'm just thinking the example that Jai Prabhu used to demonstrate the following of etiquette.
Who did?
Jai Prabhu gave.
Oh, okay.
Speaking to Drona, people like you. That was politically motivated and strategically.
That's, yes, of course.
So, in a different circumstance, he may have not followed that. If Drona wasn't there or wasn't within hearing, he could have mentioned, he could have mentioned, a different approach, just to appease somebody. But in spiritual circles, we adjust as is the circumstance within reason, I think.
Yeah.
Like in this, it's so startling. Sukadeva Goswami is coming, this young man, and then there's Lord Shiva. But from a spiritual perspective, they immediately, there was no issue in their mind.
Yeah.
They just naturally accepted it.
That's right. And then, of course, in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, who's the junior, just went out and killed them on Krishna's instruction. Thank you. Vibhu Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
My humble obeisance to you.
Hare Krishna.
It's a controversial topic, and I thought if I don't express myself here, I'll be the more ignorant leaving this podium or platform. I know that sex is God ordained.
Sex is?
Sex is God ordained. God ordained.
Okay.
And it is solely for the purpose of procreation.
That's right.
The operative word for me has a problem, solely procreation. As human beings, and seated here, I think I'm not the purest of souls that's seated here. I'm still getting to know certain things. My knowledge is minuscule compared to many that are seated here. So I take it now, procreation is the only purpose. God has designed and fashioned the human body in such a way that the male body parts, female body parts, has to function by desire. Put it erogenous zones. Then couples get married, they have to procreate. When does that intimacy stop? When does that engagement stop? So that this kind of desire is suppressed.
Okay, if you say, if that's the point, then it stops when there are enough children of the family that can be managed properly by the parents, to be brought up properly. Of course, it can also end before that, but at the very latest, people should not have more children than they can care for properly and bring up properly to become Krishna conscious devotees. Otherwise, you get into a situation where there's too many children to be managed properly, and it's bad for the children. To take it a step further, I don't know, but anyway, at least according to Vedic standards, Panchasordvam Vanam Vrajet. At the age of 50, strictly speaking, according to Vedic tradition, the man is meant to leave home and take up a renounced way of life. And the wife is taken care of by the children. Yeah. So then, there's just no question of anything like that at all. Do you think that's a reasonable answer under the circumstances?
So does the physical intimacy stop?
Yes.
Physical intimacy
Yes.
with a wife and husband
Yes.
after procreation stops?
Yes. Stops. Don't mind me putting it this way. It is not meant to be a recreational activity. Simple. As you said, for procreation.
Please understand, it's not belligerence that I speak.
No, it's okay. It's a fair question. It's a good question. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.